Welcome to Blackwater Media's Creature Feature Anthology 3, a collection of terrifying encounters with cryptids and the paranormal. So dim the lights, sit back, and prepare for the horror. I love fishing for bluegill, or brim as most Georgia folks call them. Now, brim are also commonly known as panfish, which just refers to an edible game fish that doesn't grow larger than the size of a typical frying pan. And you catch them with just about anything you can put on a hook. Breadcrumbs, cheese, bits of hot dog, anything. But for the record, the best bait for brim include worms, crickets, grasshoppers, or even small bits of shrimp. One funny thing about them, though, they can be somewhat aggressive and don't seem to have any fear of humans, but if you enjoy catching them as much as I do, that's a good thing. Anyway, a few years ago, I bought one of those pond prowlers at Bass Pro Shop. It's a one-man fishing boat, 8 feet long, and perfect for the kind of fishing that I like to do. But this isn't just a story about me telling you how I went fishing one day. It all leads into something that still gives me nightmares. I just thought that maybe sharing it would be cathartic. Some people will believe it, some won't. I don't really give a shit about that part of it. I just want to gain some degree of, peace of mind. Anyway, I was out on the boat one Saturday at one of the local ponds. Now, that particular area has a number of small to medium-sized ponds that are fantastic for brim fishing. I remember the day was mostly sunny with a few clouds that drifted across the sky from time to time, providing brief moments of shade from the late spring sunlight. Now, after about 20 minutes of fishing, I noticed some kind of movement in a dense thicket of reeds by the bank at the far side of the pond, maybe 30 to 40 yards away. Then I heard the sound of something thrashing the water, but whatever was making the noise was obscured by the reeds. And then it wasn't. Rising up from the reeds was a huge creature that had all the features of a wolf except that it was standing up on 2 legs. I was frozen in place with terror. Now this thing had dark fur, very dark fur, and eyes that seemed yellowish orange, and they were locked on me. There was what I took to be blood around the snout of the creature, and there was also what looked to be some kind of dead animal in its right hand. I remember saying under my breath, "Holy shit," over and over. I started maneuvering my boat back to the bank while also trying to keep an eye on the wolf thing. When I got myself back onto dry land and secured the boat in the cab of my truck, the creature was still there watching me. As I walked around to get into the truck, the creature let out a loud, growling snarl as if to hasten my departure. And it damn sure worked. As I pulled away, I saw the wolf creature lower down onto 4 legs and then run off in the opposite direction. Man, I tell you, I've never been so goddamn scared in my life. It just goes to show you what kind of trouble you can get in when you interrupt Dogman's dinner. I'm a university security guard, and I want to share a story about a very frightening experience. Of course, I can't reveal the name of the university, but it is located in the southeastern part of the United States. It all started one day when I was in one of the dorm buildings, just shooting the shit with another officer named Charlie, when a group of basketball players came bolting in, running straight toward their rooms. So of course, Charlie and I wanted to go over and make sure they were okay. Apparently, when they were walking back from practice, they noticed a humanoid figure standing on top of one of the buildings on campus. They stood for a minute trying to get a grasp of what they were looking at, and it was dark out by that point. While they were standing there looking at the figure, it jumped down about 3 stories and landed as a goddamn wolf. Terrified, the boys hauled ass back to the dorm as fast as they could. Now, crazy as it all sounds, we had to investigate. When we got to the doors of the building in question, we were close to the entrance of the football stadium. We looked around and saw a guy in a black trench coat pacing back and forth, staring at the dorm. We both saw him. So we went out to go see what the fuck was up with this guy, and as we started walking over in his direction, he took off running, and I kid you not, he turned into a black wolf and ran off into the darkness. To this day, I can't really account for what we saw that night. A demon, a shapeshifter, or some other kind of weird manifestation. But it's almost enough to keep a guy from working the graveyard shift. Here's a weird side note. On another occasion, that same guy who turned into the black wolf was caught on a security camera in a different dorm building stealing sage from someone's car. My name is Derek, and I'm 17 years old. I live in Middleton, Idaho. My entire life, I never believed in ghosts, or heaven, or hell, or anything else paranormal for that matter, until just recently. So let me set this up for you. Now, the whole story of my life and the things I've gone through are too long to put down, so I'll just share the basics. Because, frankly, I'm fucking afraid for my life and my family's life. And I need some help. So a couple of my friends had talked me into playing with a Ouija board in my house about a year ago. And I agreed because I thought it was all stupid and that nothing would come of it. But I was way wrong. I left the house to live with my father for a while, and the house was left vacant. Eventually I moved back in with my mom, and we decided to go back to our old house that I had played the Ouija board in. Ever since then, I've had some terrible experiences with something that I believe is an unclean spirit. A demon. I mean, shit, I've experienced things like my bed moving, scratching on the walls, waking up with a heaviness on my chest and not being able to move or speak, and even seeing a very tall, cloaked figure that physically attacked me. I'm scared to even go to sleep at night because it's appeared in front of me and has now started leaving what I assume are satanic symbols on the ceiling and floor where I sleep. It's destroyed religious objects in my house. I've taken photos of all these symbols and would like to get some kind of, interpretation as to what they might mean. And I don't know what to do because I've never experienced anything like this before. I live with 5 people, and they've all witnessed these events, although no one has been attacked except for me. It keeps getting worse. It's thrown objects across the room. And I feel like a crazy person. I just want it to fucking stop. I need help like I've never needed help in my life. Right now, my everyday existence is nothing more than a state of terror. One last thing. Don't ever mess with one of these Ouija boards. It's the most dangerous game in the world that you could play. And the ultimate prize is your soul. If you're enjoying the show, go on over to blackwatermedia.net and join the Swamp Hunter Society. Just click on the Become a Member tab on the menu, and for only $4.99 a month, you can have exclusive access to the finest paranormal, horror, and supernatural story narration content available anywhere. It's the ultimate digital audio exploration into mystery, magic, monsters, and myth. Become a Blackwater Media Swamp Hunter Society member today. My name is Jeremy. I want to tell you about a brief encounter that my late wife Sarah and I had with a dog man. We were taking care of my mom at the time. She took daily walks, both in the mornings and in the evenings. And on one particular late afternoon, we'd gone around the corner of a street, maybe 2 streets away, passing by an empty lot. I estimate the time between 5:30 and 6. So, as it was approaching dusk and we were about 20 feet from the fence surrounding it, and out of the shadow, this enormous black dog or wolf type animal appeared. Now imagine the size of a Great Dane, and then double that. Its fur was pitch black and it had the head of a wolf and what looked like glowing eyes. It traveled the length of the fence, turning its massive head at us. I said, "God damn, did you see that?" I can tell you it was so black and terrifying looking, we were shocked. We'd heard stories of strange phenomena in Sedona, but it was such a surreal experience. It's hard to explain. Have you ever had the feeling that you're seeing something that you're not supposed to see, or that it's just not even supposed to be there? That's what it was like. I mean, this thing was just walking in her neighborhood like it was stalking us. We only saw it for a few minutes, but it was terrifying to say the least, and it moved swiftly at a strange, hulking gait along the fence, almost like it was guarding the property. I don't know, but I recently read an article online about cryptids, including a creature called Dogman. Well, this creature that we saw was about as close to that as I could remember. Man, it's horrifying to know that these creatures are out there. I have a longtime friend who happens to be an environmentalist and does a great deal of work out in the Pine Barrens of New Jersey. He recently told me about seeing a dog man in an area of Manchester County. His name is Davis, by the way, and he told me that the incident happened when he and his friends were going on a camping trip out in the woods. Anyway, On the first day of the trip, they were going down the road in a big Chevy pickup truck. Davis was looking towards the wood line to make sure that no deer were going to spring out and dash in front of them. Now the truck was going about 40 miles per hour, and he noticed something was following them on the trail. Davis then told his friends to slow down a bit because they saw something following them, but before he could slow down, a massive creature jumped out in the middle of the path and then back into the woods, and they all got a good close look at it. Davis said that it was wolf-like, 7 to 9 feet tall, with highly developed muscles and perked ears and a snout like a German shepherd. He also said that the appendages this animal had were human-like, but with large claws on the end of its hands and feet and a large bushy tail. The creature hid itself in the brush, and they could all hear it growling from the thicket. Now at that point, they didn't know if the dogman would attack, in which case they were all fucked, or if it'd retreat into the forest, in which case they would all get crazy drunk that night. After about 30 seconds, the growls faded, and it was followed by the startling sound of something big tearing through the woods and moving away from them. Of course, they were all horrified at the sight of this creature. Davis said he looked over at his friends, and they all looked like they'd just seen a ghost, with the blood drained from their faces. That killed the camping trip, and most other ideas about subsequent outings, fishing, hiking, and whatnot. I've done a lot of reading about cryptids over the years, and of course, the Pine Barrens is often attributed to sightings of the Jersey Devil. When Davis and I were talking about it, he just shook his head and said, "Shit," as if one monster isn't enough to have to deal with. My encounter with the dogman goes back some 40 years. It was on my grandparents' property in Denmark, Wisconsin, which is southeast of Green Bay. The land out there is a lot of farmland with patches of woods. I was 10 years old at the time. My grandparents owned a few acres of land, and on the far right corner of their yard, there's a thick patch of woods and swamp that goes on for a bit before hitting another farm field. I was standing on the back deck shooting cans with my BB gun. It was a hot and muggy morning in mid-July, and all morning outside I just had a real eerie feeling that I couldn't shake. It was like I was being watched, but every time I looked around the yard, I never saw anything. So I just went back to shooting cans, but I got that feeling again. I started scanning the tree line of the woods, and that's when I saw it. It was standing next to a tree, and it was absolutely massive. Now, when I got older, I went back to that tree and tried to get an estimate of height, and I'd say it was 7 to 7.5 feet tall. The only way I can compare the body is like to Arnold Schwarzenegger. It was unreal how big its shoulders, arms, and chest were. It was covered in gray fur that was really, really shaggy and thick on its shoulders and down a part of its body. I know when people describe dogmen, you hear a lot of, "Oh, it looked like a timber wolf standing on 2 legs," or "It had the head of a German shepherd." This was not the case at all. The head and face looked like a werewolf. It had pointed ears on the top of its head. Its eyes were hot yellow and almost seemed to glow even in daylight. And it was snarling with its lips open, and it almost seemed to be smiling. Let me tell you, the look and smile on this thing's face was pure evil. And sinister is the only way I can describe it. I don't recall if it had a tail or not. And I feel like the legs looked like that of a human's and not bent like a dog's. But I was mostly looking at the head and body. After what had to be only 10 seconds, but felt like hours, without warning, it broke eye contact with me and took off sprinting to its right. It went through some really thick brush and emerged farther down the tree line and took off into the woods. The thing is, no person could clear what it cleared in the time that it did. It was seconds that it ran, probably a good 50 or 60 yards, and it was all thick brush down through there. Being absolutely terrified, I went back in the house and didn't go outside the rest of the day. Ironically enough, my aunt came up to me later and said, "I heard some strange sounds outside last night. I've been meaning to tell you, but I didn't want to freak you out." Now, I didn't tell her what I saw, thinking she would think I was crazy or making it up, but I insisted that she tell me. She said she heard a loud growling and snarling walking around the house the previous night, unlike anything she's ever heard before. Although my grandparents are both long gone, I still visit the area quite often for sentimental reasons mostly, and I haven't seen anything strange since. I haven't heard any other reports from the area, but I know that there was a sighting of a Bigfoot crossing the road in that general area back in the 50s. What is it about that damn place that attracts monsters? Let me tell you about an experience that my wife and I had last autumn. And by last, I mean late September of 2020. I wanted to be specific because I assume that people will be listening to this at any point in the future. Anyway, my wife and I were sitting out on the back deck, listening to music and having drinks. This is something we do fairly regularly in the fall, as it's generally cool enough to enjoy the glow and soft warmth of the fire pit and the crisp autumn air. With the kitchen window open, the music from the stereo wafted out into the evening air and made everything that much more pleasant and enjoyable. It was a Friday. Now, earlier that afternoon, I'd grilled a couple of steaks and a package of brats, and that, along with the potato salad, the grilled zucchini, and Texas toast, would easily make an autumn weekend's worth of delicious dinners. Anyway, our back deck looks out across the backyard, which goes on about 30 yards, at which point a fence squares the yard in. Now, beyond that fence, there's a stretch of woodland that starts about 10 yards beyond the fence line and grows denser as you move inward. So we were sitting out there talking about getting another couple of pieces of Halloween decoration and how good it was to see the changing color of the leaves, when my wife suddenly pointed out to the far side of the yard, beyond the fence and into the wood line. What she saw, well, what we both saw, was what appeared to be a pair of eyes. Glowing eyes, and I mean stark, orange, amber eyes looking dead at us from the wood line. Then the eyes rose up to at least 8 feet off the ground. Behind those eyes was the outline of what looked like a giant wolf. It took a step forward and we got a better look at it. And this thing was fucking massive, with black fur and a huge German shepherd looking head. Now, we sat there frozen and frankly horrified. My wife broke the silence and quietly asked, "What the goddamn hell is that thing?" And all I could do was shake my head. And at that exact moment, we saw it drop down to 4 legs, turn, and shoot off into the woods. I thought about it, and there's really no way for me to correctly convey just how fast this creature moved. Anyway, a few seconds later, we heard a bone-chilling howl in the distance. We just sat there, calming ourselves by sipping on whiskey highballs. My wife got her iPad and started doing searches. After only about a minute, she learned that these creatures were known as dogmen, and they've been sighted all over the country and even other parts of the world, and that they're powerful, vicious, and seem to regard humans with absolute malice and contempt. So, that's how we came to learn about these creatures. I've heard and read about how so many people say they want to see one. I promise you, you don't. My wife and I have nightmares about our encounter. Terrible nightmares about being stalked by the creature and then turning around only to see a menacing pair of large amber eyes. Late one night, my insomnia got the better of me, and after hours of tossing and turning, I gave up and went downstairs to make coffee. My dog decided she would take this rare opportunity to go for a late night walk, and I thought since it was a cool evening, maybe it would do us both good. I decided to take our usual route since it was very dark and we both knew the neighborhood well. Things were not right almost from the start. As soon as we hit the next block, Bella, my dog, seemed very unsettled. Now, I just wrote it up to the dark and time of our walk, although we have walked many times at this hour over the years for some reason or other. She kept looking behind us and rushing along. Not at all her usual MO. Usually she just strolls slowly and carefully because of her advanced age. Now, I wasn't concerned at first because for years I've carried a .45 sidearm and the entire neighborhood knew it. Now, we got to our first right at the stop sign, and I thought while she did her thing on the fire hydrant, I'd light a cigarette. The street light went dim and then out, and I thought, okay, shit, that was weird, but we kept walking. Every street light we walked under dimmed and went out, or almost. I started feeling the hair on the back of my neck stand up and hearing noises on the opposite side of the street too. Maybe cats or skunks. That's what I told myself. Halfway home, I looked at my phone and it was 3 a.m. Great. I put my phone back in my pocket and rubbed my St. Benedict medal for comfort. I was really working myself up. Now that's when the shit happened. Bella spun, ran in front of me, and the hackles and ears fully up started growling like I have never heard her do. She was baring her teeth and acting very aggressive at essentially nothing, at least that I could see. She then let loose of her bladder and spun and took off as fast as a 15-year-old dog can. Now I was really freaked the hell out. I dropped the leash and started after her. Now that's when every dog in the goddamn neighborhood started howling. Bella was not barking or even in sight, but dogs were baying and howling, and while I was chasing after her, maybe it was just my imagination or something, I don't know. But for whatever reason, I became very aware of the blessed medal I had around my neck. Now check it out. I was walking in the direction that Bella went, and I was saying to myself that at her age, how far could she go? Now, feeling like I was being watched, I found her a block and a half away in a yard no dog goes in because the owners treat their lawn with that anti-canine treatment shit. And she was sitting in front of a statue of Mary. I said to myself, this walk is over. I called my wife to come and get us, and when dialing the phone, did not miss the fact that although 10 minutes had elapsed, my phone still read 3 a.m. Now, of course, my wife showed up very pissed off until I got in the car with Bella, who was shaking so much you would have thought it to be 40 degrees instead of 65. And I was white as a sheet. She told me on the ride over, she saw a black shape dart behind a tree, only it wasn't there when she drove by. And she said to me, "It's a good thing you brought your gun." But I, on the other hand, knew it was a different kind of protection and of a different nature that had saved us. After that, my wife asked me why I got a St. Michael medal for Bella's collar. I said, "It can't hurt." I know that night we were stalked by real evil, and I'd rather the whys and what remain a mystery. But what I do know for damn sure, I don't ever want to go through something like that again. I live in rural Montana, and I truly believe that the creature that I saw a couple of nights ago in the woods near my house was a dog man. I was inside of my barn when I heard an aggressive scratching coming from the direction of my door, and my two big Rottweilers started causing mayhem, barking up a storm inside the house. I thought it might be a mountain lion or maybe even a bear trying to get in my barn and feast on my goats and chickens. I grabbed my damn shotgun, and when I opened the door, I saw a creature, maybe 25 yards out, and what I saw shocked the shit out of me. I was looking at a gigantic, wolf-like thing standing there, looking back at me, but the motherfucker was standing up on two legs. It stood there just long enough for me to get a good look at it, as if that was the point. Shit, I raised and pointed my shotgun at the son of a bitch, and in that instant, it turned and ran off into the darkness. I fired a shot anyway, just to let it know that I wasn't fucking around. I noticed that there were scratches covering my door. These scratches looked much deeper than what a mountain lion or bear could have made. I remember hearing about dogmen a few months previously from one friend of mine, but I never imagined that I would ever see one. Then I remembered that lots of my neighbors had been losing their livestock at an alarming rate. Now I know why. Since my encounter with the creature, I haven't seen it again. But I know that it's still out there lurking in the woods. And I can promise you this: my shotgun is never, ever very far away. Two summers ago, I think it was mid-June or early July, my cousin was staying at my house. I live with my grandparents and take care of them. She went out onto the back porch to have a smoke around 10 o'clock, and while she did that, I decided to have a cigar and went out to my car to retrieve my lighter. It was a pretty nice night, good visibility from the moon, but I live out in a relatively rural area of Texas. Visibility isn't as good as you get into the city. Although there were no streetlights, I could clearly see across the road and see my driveway, which I normally can't. But that night there was a very bright full moon. Now across from my house is a lake, separated by about 100 yards of land, and a small road. As I was coming back from my car along the edge of the lake, I saw a creature. And I say that because that's the most apt word for it. This damn thing was easily 8+ feet tall and was on its hind legs and covered in fur and had a stereotypical werewolf profile. And by that I mean it had a wolf-shaped head and a large growth of fur leading from the bottom of its maw down to its stomach. I clearly remember hearing the footfalls down by the lakeshore. The neighbors to the right of the edge of the lakeshore had just planted juvenile trees along the property, so they were each about 6 feet high, and this thing easily towered over them. I genuinely felt my blood run cold, and as quietly as possible, I ran back into my house while this thing just ambled along the lakeshore. It had a fairly big stride as well. That only frightened me more. I came back out onto the porch to tell my cousin, and she immediately asked me what happened before I even opened my mouth. And according to her, all the color had drained from my face. I told her everything, and I promised I wasn't messing around, and she agreed. She knew it when she saw it on my face. We stayed silent on the porch while we smoked, and we heard weird crackling in the brush at the bottom of the hill the back of the house overlooked. Nothing ever came of it, and in the 2 years since, I haven't seen the thing around here, but I'll never forget it. I still think about this every once in a while, and it always brings back feelings of terror and dread. You're listening to the Blackwater Media Radio Network, the finest in digital audio entertainment. This is Blackwater Media coming to you from the great city of Atlanta. I wanted to pass along a story that was told to me by my uncle. He passed away a few years ago, and I think it's important that what he witnessed, what he experienced, should be shared with the world. But before that, I need to tell you up front, there are some very, very disturbing aspects to this story. So consider yourself warned. This story goes back to 1957, the year that Hurricane Audrey, one of the deadliest tropical cyclones in U.S. history, devastated the southwestern Louisiana coast. My uncle said that there were many folks down in the bayous that were killed, and the survivors went out trying to recover bodies. He and some others who had friends in that area participated in recovery efforts. He said that at some point, he broke off from his group, which he admitted wasn't a smart thing to do. But he came up to a big cypress, and about 25 feet up, he saw what looked to him to be a gigantic black wolf sitting on a branch, eating the body of a child. From the clothing remnants and the length of the hair, it looked to him like a little girl, maybe 10 years old. He said he reached for his rifle and shot the thing 3 times with .35 caliber Winchester shells. He said you could see the impact as each thud caused water to spray off the thing's body. After the 3rd shot, it looked dead at him with pale yellow eyes, full in the face, and growled. And then it went right back to eating, now licking its lips with slurping and sucking sounds, making the sight even more gruesome. He said he hauled ass out of there, and he was haunted by the thought of creatures like that foraging the storm-struck bayou for the flesh of a dead person to feast on. But somehow he found the courage to go back the next day. He said that the thing had taken one of the child's thigh bones and jammed it hard into the base of the tree and hung the torso, stripped clean of flesh, and the child's head, which was untouched so he could clearly see her face, all hung there for him to find, made it very clear that these were cold-hearted, evil, calculating monsters, not just animals. That was in 1957. My uncle had been holding this inside of him for 50 years, until he told it to me in 2007. A story about the aftermath of a natural disaster, and the story of a monster. A coworker and I were in a certain area in the wilds of Wisconsin where we do environmental monitoring. Now, by monitoring, I mean standard rain event monitoring of an MSHA regulated site. And due to lack of rain, the site was not discharging water to sample. The quarry had been producing a few weeks prior, so we were grabbing a few samples off stockpiles for quality assurance. It was an overcast day, almost dark, with the sun barely breaking through deep gray cloud cover. Now keep in mind, the site was in a wooded area, in some places densely wooded, and upon exiting, my coworker and I noticed a deep growl or scream coming from the deeper part of the woods. And after a few minutes, my coworker shouted several hellos, but got nothing. About 10 minutes later, we're on another part of the property just outside the tree line in an old quarry grabbing some more samples. Suddenly, a flock of crows on a ridge about 100 yards away started panicking. This went on for a minute or two, and upon looking up at the crows, I noticed a large brown and gray upright figure skulking at the tree line. I was able to view the creature for 10 to 15 seconds. All I can tell you is, it was a giant wolf that was standing upright. That's right, a goddamn gigantic upright walking wolf. And in the time we saw it, it ducked down once and then stood back up. Now let me explain something to you. I'm 6'4", 230 pounds. And I could tell that this damn thing was at least 7.5 feet tall. Anyway, we kept looking in that direction, and eventually it ducked down and never rose up again. After that, we left and spent the day trying to figure out just what the hell this wolf-type creature really was, and how hard it would be to do our work with the knowledge that something like that was out there somewhere. Now, of course, I'd heard of people claiming to see Bigfoot, but I never really thought much of it, as the odds of such a creature even existing were small. I'd never have given credence to the existence of a giant bipedal wolf. It looks like I was wrong. We're currently looking into a trail camera as the sound came from deeper from the woods, which is another parcel of land we don't have permission to be on. And to be honest, I'm not all that excited to go that deep down into the woods anyway.